There we go. Okay. And the break, okay, perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Mullenax. I'm the Executive Director of the Hagerstown Metropolitan Planning Organization, otherwise known simply as the MPO. Welcome you all here this evening. Thank you for coming out. We're going to talk about the draft corridor assessment we did that was focused on improving safety on Washington Street, which is also WV51 right here in the Charlestown. I want to thank the Jefferson County Commission for allowing us to use their meeting space to hold this hybrid meeting for folks who are joining online, teams for those of you who are able to come out. So again, I'm with the MPO, and so for those who may not be familiar, we are a federally designated and funded regional transportation planning agency. So there are about 400 MPOs across the country. They are created wherever the census designates urban. So, hey, all right, there's the airport. Come on in. Real Madrid. Maybe. No barcode? No barking? All righty. So, so there are about 400 MPOs across the country, and we're the one that was designated that covers not only Jefferson County, but also Berkeley County, West Virginia, and Washington County, Maryland. So as part of putting this plan together, we have utilized a consulting firm or two to help us draft the study. So let's see. So let's introduce my team real fast and turn over to you, Jim, and your crew. So my name's Matt Mullenax, and Michaela, are you able to?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Michaela McDonough. I am the transportation planner with HEP MPO.
And Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Tim Fraser. I am the project manager of our monthly bank project. We do have one other team member here, Rebecca. What do you consider yourself?
Right. I'm Rebecca Chrisman. I'm a traffic engineer with a specialty in highway safety with Michael Baker.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And then the other four folks aren't able to join tonight. They have a variety of areas of expertise that help together the draft document. Okay, so the objectives for this evening is to review and solicit feedback from the draft corridor safety assessment on Washington Street. And then we're going to outline the next steps for public comments, how we finalize the assessment, and talk a little bit about the Safe Streets for All, the SS4A discretionary plan program. So those are the objectives for the overview of the presentation. We're going to talk about the corridor. We engage the stakeholders. We talk about that SS4A federal discretionary grant program. Go through some of the conceptual designs that are in the draft plan. And then we'll talk about how we plan to use it, monitoring and evaluation, as hopefully the recommendations start to get implemented over time as we evaluate that against crash data. And then we'll talk about the next. Okay. So the project timeline, we started working on this assessment in July. So we conducted a needs assessment. We went out and we did a field review meeting on August 24th, I believe. We had about 30 folks there. And then from there, we've gone through and reviewed the Safe Streets for All implementation grant, the latest notice of funding opportunity or the NOFO, all the requirements that are tied to that. And then we've defined how we hope to be able to monitor and evaluate this plan in terms of its actual quantitative improvement on killed and severely injured crashes or KSI. And then lastly, we're closing in on the timeline now. There we go. Finalizing the report. Okay, so that's the project timeline. So now moving over to the corridor assessment. So the purpose of this assessment, so last May in 2024, the HPMPO Policy Board, we adopted our first regional safety action. And as part of the completion of that safety action plan, we developed a high injury, or regional high injury. And what that is that those are the roads that are identified that have high amount or identified with killed or severely injured crashes. So we're trying to follow Federal Highway Administration's Safe Systems approach, and that is aimed at reducing killed and severely injured crashes while also minimizing existing risk. So we'll talk about the risk assessment tool that was used as part of this as well. So out of that, out of the evaluation of the Hagerstown network, there were 3 corridors that we chose to evaluate further. So in Jefferson County, it's Washington Street. In Berkeley County, that was Edwin Miller Boulevard, and we had a public meeting on that last week. And tomorrow night, we'll be in Hagerstown to talk about Virginia Avenue. So this assessment summarizes existing conditions, proposed safety countermeasures, potential fighting strategies for the corridor. And the main outcome is to reduce severe crashes, especially for vulnerable roads. So again, what we are trying to do is we're trying to be able to minimize killed and severely injured crashes. And then, yeah, I'll go ahead and turn over to Jim for existing beach.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. Just looking at the existing conditions and what the corridor, our corridor looks like. It goes from West Street into the, say, southwest to Flowing Springs intersection, up here for 40. And I'll call it north. But so it's about 1.2 miles. And most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this corridor. Coming from 340, it's 4 lanes, and then it narrows down to 2 lanes as it enters residential segment of the corridor, and all the way down to the historic downtown area. Starting around the Flowing Springs area, we have AABP, which are average volume, average traffic volumes. And approximately 22,000, and then that narrows down, feeds down to around 10,000 per day in the downtown area. There are 2 transit lines that run the corridor, and there are stops at George Street intersection area, and also at Upper Clovens. Curb ramps, especially in the historic district, have been upgraded last, say, 10 years, and they do have ADA ramps and new pedestrian signals at those key intersections. But the remainder of the corridor that does have some sidewalk, but it does end north at Alawala Drive. Some of the safety issues that we've identified, most common crash types are rear end, right angle crashes from a lot of turning movements along the corridor, and some side swipes, so it's like parked cars. 86% of the crashes occurred up near Flowing Springs and West Street. So at both ends of the corridor is where the majority of the crashes occurred. There was 1 fatal crash. I talk about crash data, about 5 years of data. And the data that we used was 2018, 30 months later. But there was 1 fatal crash, and that was at the intersection. We've identified the inadequate pedestrian infrastructure, missing sidewalks, uncontrolled crossings, and poor visibility to obstructions and lighting. There are a lot of vehicle conflicts experienced with right turns, missing left turns, and unsafe travel behavior, driver behavior, in particular to the heading through gas station. All right, now it's a little bit about future conditions. And first of all, it's talking at the state level. State is required to do a vulnerable road user assessment of the state. And that's basically looking at all non-motorized, but it does include motorcycles, pedestrians, bicyclists. And West Street to George Street was identified in the state study as a priority VRU corridor. What that means, that could be potentially finding opportunities, a priority, and get some of these safety improvements installed. Obviously, there's a lot of redevelopment going on here. For you guys are more aware than I am, but especially the American University transition into those facilities. We did look through and look at some of the planning efforts from the most recent comp plan. This is the 2040 comp plan. Found adopted a principal approach. There are some safety improvements identified in that plan, and there's also new connections identified. I didn't lay those out, but there are, I don't think any of them have advanced. New connections to get some of that traffic off of Western. Okay, here's a look at the crash data. You can see, West Street down here at the end is a bundle of crashes. Then Flowing Springs that we talked about, total for that 5-year period, 293 crashes. And 7 have resulted in KSI. KSI focusing on, and that stands for killed or severely injured. It's part of that accident. You can see the totals down here. There's 7 of those, and then other with minor injury, possible injury, no. For the total. Okay, this is our planning document, the actual study, border study. It is available on that website, like you mentioned. If you haven't had access, plus it's comment at this time, but this just shows the outline. What we're going to be focusing on really is the conceptual design portion of that plan. And we'll mention too is there's a couple of appendices. One is that federal highways riskful, safety riskful, that we incorporated in this study. It was also preliminary planning level, planning costs, all the recommended concepts that we provided in the study. All right, so quickly go over, Matt mentioned last October, we did do a site visit. We walked the corridor, and like you said, there was probably about 30 people involved in that, including federal highways. They actually came here. That's when they really laid out the need for this tool, how it can be integrated into the study. And we did that, and they were a big part of what was identifying a lot of potential countermeasures. This is what the tools focuses on: crash exposure, crash likelihood, and crash severity. And then also asks for some prompts. It basically is a spreadsheet, a glorified spreadsheet tool. And I will show you what our results were. This is the way you evaluate the corridor. You evaluate each intersection on the corridor. And that is on the right side here. And on the left side are the segments between the intersections. See, there's 11 segments along the corridor and A through L intersections. And the numbers don't matter as much. But what we try to identify here is, okay, we have our countermeasures. What is that? We about and did it implement the implementations. So basically, after the countermeasures built, what does that do with the risk assessment? And what we're looking for here is the overall improvement. So about 10% less risk for mainly be the pedestrians and bicyclists than a lot in the quarter. So reducing that safety risk 10%. Okay, just a quick overview on safe routes for all. The primary purpose we started this was let's get the town ready to. They wanted to go after a safe street for all grants, have the documentation and everything they need to apply for. So Matt mentioned that this NOFO had been released. This one is, I think it's about 4, 5
5 as of
So the federal highways, we did releases this notice of funding opportunity. Released in March of this year. They released a funding opportunity and grant applications every year around the same time, spring. The deadline to apply for those is next week. I know Elizabeth has been really trying hard to get something we could apply for.
Yeah, again,
It's struggling. The hardest part is there's still a match.
there is a 20% local match required typically for an implementation grant. Federal Highway has said that they're looking for projects around $2 million, but one of the challenges of this particular grant, so when Jim said year 5, this is this was a new federal program that was part of IIJA, which is the Federal Surface Transportation Bill. And so as part of this program, only cities, counties, MPOs, regional governments are able to apply for funds. So the states are not eligible applicants, but we found in in our safety evaluation that most of the crashes, most unsafe roads from a crash standpoint or a risk standpoint are owned by the state. So there has to be some sort of an agreement between a requesting entity, like say a city, and with the state for what improvements would be recommended, how contract administration would work, how liability would work, and things like that. And it's a question that West Virginia is being asked all over the state, how do we get through this? Because West Virginia has the fourth or fifth largest road network among 50 states. It's about 93% of the road network is in the state since the 1930s. So it's a challenge, and I know Jim mentioned Elizabeth, so Councilmember Ricketts for the city of Charleston. I know she had some discussions with the city's infrastructure committee on the possibilities of pursuing some of these, and fortunately, our timing was not impeccable as we're closing in on trying to have meaningful recommendations and cost estimates and when this NOFO is due. It's timing's very challenging, but hopefully there'll be future. And also, like you said, so like HSIP, right, is a formula federal funding by that West Virginia DOH is able to use at their discretion. And so in the event that we're not able to secure SS4A funds for some of these recommendations on Washington Street, there's still other funding opportunities.
All right, going into the conceptual design portion. I have Rebecca Christman, who's on the line. She's our traffic engineer. She developed a lot of these concepts and has a really good understanding of it. So as we go through it, I'll have her chime in on some of the more details of it. But basically, we're looking at 3 different concepts were developed, one for West Street and then one flowing, the Flowing Springs area, and then the commercial area up near Flowing Springs. We did address the remaining signals, but just as a generic, not specific to each intersection, individual intersection at all. Going to be applied to all of them. Okay, starting at West Street. Obviously, the West Street, the main safety concern that we got, especially from the on-site, was the traffic coming in on West Street and then cutting right through this over the curve onto West Street. So that was the main thing we wanted to address. And what we're looking at here, and these are, like I said, these are safety countermeasures that we're identifying here are part of the MUTCD and federal highways. They have a whole listing of proven safety measures that we pick and grab from. But as far as this intersection, Rebecca, you want to take over and just lay out what we're doing?
Sure. The big, as Jim was saying, the big factor that we noticed in the field visit and was brought to our attention was the existing condition of this Liberty gas station is that it's just paved basically to the edge of roadway. The curb is insubstantial and it's almost like the whole thing is a giant driveway. And then in the existing condition, it's just one lane coming into this approach. And there are frequently people who want to turn left and they kind of block up the traffic at the signal. And so there is a pattern of motorists cutting the corner through the gas station lot. And a sense of peril for pedestrians at the corner and you just rounding the corner, just anywhere and in the lot themselves. And so the focus of this, and there's a crash history of crashes, vehicular crashes in the parking lot and the cut throughs, all on this quadrant. There are a couple other crashes at the intersection, but I'd say 2/3 of them are focused on this cut through right turn movement. And so we're recommending, there seems to be enough width between these two curbs to fit in an actual striped additional lane to get the left turners out of the queue, if you will, and so that the through and rights can proceed unencumbered, so on a normal timing of the signal. And then to put in a buffered sidewalk with a grass strip. There is a bit of a grass strip kind of farther upstream. And so just continue that to the corner and channelize the driveways, make it very clear that these are the only two places you're supposed to enter this lot, not just wide open curb. And then adding the left lane, we're talking about adding a left turn phase, a protected permissive left turn phase with new signal technology, which is flashing yellow arrow. So that allows you to do protected phases sometimes and then protected permissive other times. And that actually is safer for pedestrians because when a pedestrian like pushes the button or whatever to cross the crosswalk, then the left turn can become a protected only. And so they're not permissive so that the pedestrian has the chance to cross in full right of way. And so that's what you see kind of, and then there's a little accompanying sign. But when you do that, you always have to have two signal heads for the through movement. So that would make you have to add an additional signal head for at that signal. And then we're recommending putting reflectorized back plates on all the signal heads because there is the remaining, people talked about glare. I guess this is a primary sort of east-west corridor, Washington Street is. And there are times of day when there's a sense that maybe the glare on the signals is inhibiting people from seeing the indications. So that's you'll hear us, that's universal for all the signals on the corridor, but here as well.
Okay, now, jumped
ahead.
out on the other side of the corridor and over to the Floating Springs intersection. And I know this is a major intersection here, so but go ahead, Rebecca, I'll let you.
Oh, sure. This one, Jim introduced the traffic volumes at the beginning of the presentation. 22,000 vehicles a day. It's twice as many as are on the other side of the corridor. And the cars are coming off an expressway. It's an interchange, going fast, a lot of free flow. No accommodation for pedestrians here at all right now, hardly. I think Matt himself tried to cross over there and people almost ran him over. So our focus here is really our focus here is to make this much more pedestrian friendly by reducing the crossing distances, closing up those real big radiuses for the right turns, Actually extending and widening the existing concrete median and actually creating a pedestrian refuge area. This is a high volume, high speed. We're trying to ratchet the speeds down as they enter into town, but this is the first intersection you hit. So crossing all those lanes on those big radius is just really hard for pedestrians. So recommending sort of pedestrian refuge, full suite of pedestrian facilities, and then bringing those radiuses in and just forcing the right turns to actually operate with the signal instead of be more free flow, which is what those large radiuses encourage. So, and again, the back plates, the flashing yellow arrows, because that also is, it gives you an additional pedestrian crossing safety feature to switch to those kind of left turn signal heads. And then, so that's focused on the actual signalized intersection improvements here. We have we're going to get to the next section, I guess, where we have sort of this commercial section corridor improvements, which recommend bringing sidewalk in to this intersection from the west. But this is more isolated, like what to do about this intersection and the pedestrians who do get here. That other solution is more universal for what to do about the pedestrians along the corridor and how are they going to get here and what to do with them once they do get here. So a little bit of restriping because of the more channelization. Well, it's not, I don't want to use that word. More the traditional right turn bay instead of the more free flow right turn bay. And then giving the pedestrians a chance to have refuge in the middle and push the button again to get across. Because devoting too much time to those pedestrians would make the queue, giving them all that time to cross. That's a lot of lanes to walk and take away from the timing of the signal. This way you can operate kind of intermittently with the pedestrians and the cars, because it's a lot of cars out there.
So the pedestrians are only making halfway through and then they have to wait another cycle?
Potentially, it depends. Probably it depends on the demand and the signal phasing. But yes,
It's not very safe.
Yeah.
well, there would be push buttons out there and additional heads. This is a common solution for divided.
But
And
it would be
it
a
would-
delay to actually get a pedestrian across the street with all those lanes. Like,
Excuse me.
are we gonna stop cars another 3 seconds, or are we gonna stop them another 35 or 40 seconds?
You
Well,
understand what he's asking you? I don't know if you heard that.
I did not.
Yeah, basically, he's like, do they have to stop in the pedestrian island in the center instead of going the whole way across?
Right. So it can be timed either way. And so my thought would be, it would be based on probably time of day and the actuation of the signal. So typical pedestrian timing is 7 seconds to walk across, and then you have to flash the do not walk, and that is calculated at 3.5 seconds per foot. So if you like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12-foot lanes is 12 times 6 is 72 times 3.5 seconds per foot we would have to flash. And that, or no, 3.5, I've got this wrong. It's 3.5 feet per second. So 72 divided by 3 is like 24 probably. So that would be 24 additional seconds plus 7 would be 30. So it would all depend on how long you wanted to stop the cars for and but this gives the pedestrians who start at the end of the 7 seconds a chance to get halfway. So it's flexibility really. for the designers.
Yeah.
What is, I'm jumping ahead, let me know, but what's being done, I guess, as you're coming into town, because just after the stoplight, it quickly reduces to
Yep. We got
that, okay, because that's like a drag racing, a daily drag race there. Where they cut through that intersection to speed ahead of each other in the next two lanes.
Yep.
To get to the-
Now, this is the full commercialized area. There's two different segments. We gotta, the next slide will blow this up a little bit, but I think at least give the overview, the concept of what changes you have here.
Sure. So the big overview is to narrow the lanes, create a more sort of commercial context or a more urban context. So narrow the lanes, bring the curb lines in a little bit, and then build continuous sidewalk for the entire corridor. And then through that would also probably involve a certain amount of access management, because once you put in curb and sidewalk, you kind of define the driveways more. And then opening though back up to the full section back at Flowing Springs. But we're proposing to go ahead and drop the second lane in the block between, coming into town, in the block between Flowing Springs and Hollywood Boulevard or whatever, so that they're not racing to make their lane. That becomes a lane drop, if you will, where, and then of course the right turn lane was already dropped. One drops at Flowing Springs, the next one drops at Hollywood. And so it's just one lane coming into town there. We developed the left turn lanes at the intersections, but also provide a center turn lane for the non-signalized intersections and all the driveways, so that the people exiting the driveways or entering the driveways and other small streets can get out of the main flow of traffic. Virginia, the other one we're doing tomorrow night, doesn't have a center turn lane, and it has a huge number of rear end crashes. Because when you have this density of people who are coming and going, you kind of want them out of the travel way, if you will. But anyway, sidewalk, and where there's right of way and room, we're recommending buffered sidewalk, but in the area kind of closer to Kentucky Fried Chicken, the sidewalk would be right probably at the back of curb.
This
So-
will focus more in.
Yeah, so on this one, you can see, it's kind of what I was describing. However, that you can see right in the middle, there's it's an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, but it's not officially a mid-block crossing because it is at an intersection with Allawilla. Excuse me, but we're recommending it. Right now, it's just this brick thing that you can barely see. We're recommending to make it pop through high visibility crosswalk, ADA features, and then RRFB, which is rapid flashing beacons, basically, that can be actuated by the pedestrian.
Those are school bus stops too.
Excuse me?
Those are school bus stops as well.
On almost three.
Almost right where you have that crosswalk.
Oh,
Because there's a high amount of traffic that goes because the school bus comes this way and picks up. So that's the Kentucky Fried Chicken. So
Yeah.
like right where you have the little yellow dude. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
So
bus
that's
that's coming
crosswalk.
back towards Sheep. And all the traffic that's going this way typically still keeps going because they don't realize with the split highway that they have to stop for a school bus. So it's also, I mean, is there any solution for something like that?
to hear that one. We're done.
So that's a.
I'm having
that's-
trouble
that's a
understanding.
Bus route, is that?
At that crosswalk,
I cannot.
the existing crosswalk where the bricks are.
Right at the big tree.
Yes,
He's saying that is also used as a school bus stop.
okay,
And the problem is that traffic doesn't stop. Because they don't think they have to stop
On the split lane.
because of the split lanes at this point.
And the other school bus stop is the Kentucky Fried Chicken. So.
Is this kind of a regional misunderstanding by your drivers, or it only happens here?
I would say drivers are suspended. I
You said drivers were all.
don't know that.
I have seen on Winchester Avenue in Martinsburg near my house, people just pulling around, stopped cars, school buses, if there's enough room on the shoulder or the on-street parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much going on this street that drivers are not aware that there's a school bus.
Yeah.
So anything you can do
Heightened.
to remove the center turn. Because if there's a certain point where the traffic, the 20,000 trips evaporate and it's not at the KFC. Right, on the
Yeah.
trip counts.
Right.
There's a major
Yeah.
trip count change somewhere here.
Yeah.
So anywhere that you can get closer to the Washington Street, the historic roadway section sooner. Like, I greatly appreciate getting rid of the dumping cars off into the Hollywood Casino. Dropping the lanes as soon as you possibly can, because that's frankly where that traffic is going. Yeah. But like in this section this is the only crossing, it's another half mile to there's another pedestrian crossing in town. So anything that could be done to heighten pedestrian facilities in this area, putting pedestrian refuges in this, dropping that center turn lane.
And this is where your fatality was. I know it was just 1 in 5 years,
Yeah.
but this was where it was.
I almost watched one the other day because you'll see the Alfredos and the turf. You see a lot of pedestrian traffic, the turf hotel. You see a lot of foot traffic crossing there to get to the convenience foods on the other side. You see pedestrian traffic, a lot more now of pedestrian traffic coming in from the racetrack into the downtown resources. I mean, I probably travel this intersection, this whole strip here probably 4 times a day, at 8 times a day. I mean, it's nothing to have pedestrian traffic 10 o'clock at night, and it's not well lit, and then you have all the ambient lighting. That's there.
Rebecca, I think what they're asking for is, one is
Like
Yes. some type of awareness that that is a bus stop location, school bus stop location. And if there's a way to emphasize, and they're even saying removal of the turn lane. So the traffic coming the other way will see that they need to stop. So it's either some type of awareness that traffic coming the opposite direction of the school bus needs to stop.
Well, certainly there are school bus warning signs and that sort of thing that are,
Yeah, don't
a
take
problem.
it that the drivers here read.
Yeah.
The more physical cues, the more constraint we could be, so that the cars know exactly where they need to be and their focus is on their movement.
Where are the kids? Hotel. Oh, the.
No, they live,
Ones that are riding, some of them don't know.
well, a lot of them live on this side. They live
Oh,
behind.
behind here.
So there's apartments, Jefferson, like with some, it's a big, yeah. Yeah.
So
Sounds like they should
I
move the bus stop.
actually,
Well, there's
Okay.
here,
I
there's
am-
Kentucky Fried Chicken and where your yellow food is.
Oh, there's
And
one
it should
up here.
always be safe there. If a kid can't cross the road, it's not
Right.
safe.
Right,
So
I agree.
moving the bus stop is not the proper answer.
I didn't hear that. What did you,
The one, there's 2 stops. One's up by the Kentucky Fried Chicken on the left side of the screen. And then the second one is right at that crosswalk,
Right.
On the same side,
in the middle, on the same side.
same side, yeah.
pick
So
up
there's
and drop off
buses
at
going
the
up.
same time of day, on the same side of the road?
Yep, in the morning, yeah.
And it's,
They're
and
dropping
it's on
off.
the,
Yeah,
the sort of planned south side?
Yes.
So this idea, and I am actually unclear on the rules on this, and I'm a little ashamed that I am, but once you actually, if you were to build a full 12-foot median through there, would that then make it so the opposing cars no longer do have to stop?
But
Yeah.
that doesn't address the speed or the crossing.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
So we still have the width.
Yeah,
Of
the kids are
curb to
crossing the
curb.
street. The kids are crossing the street too.
Right, but I'm wondering, once you actually build a divided road, I thought there was some rule that once it was actually divided, the opposing traffic didn't have to stop.
And that's,
only because I did it. I mean, I had a woman honking yell at me and the bus driver was honking and yelling and I didn't know because I thought because it was there was the middle turn lane that was, we kept going. And I called the bus garage and I looked it up and I called the Department of Highways and found out what the ruling is. So yes, you are supposed to stop with, even on this with the middle turn lane.
Well, yes, I know that when there's a turn lane, you have to. My question is, once, if you build an actual median,
she's saying that they should still be required to stop.
So that-
There's a median, they don't have to stop.
All there is, they don't have to stop.
But in this location, if I read in the report, there's a big drop in the amount of trips going here, and they're not all going to camps. They were all breaking off at different points. They're all destination things. And then one of the constraints is right of way. There's not enough room. Moving or replacing the Turk Hotel sign is like a third rails. So like even putting that in is something that you will find folks in this community that will go ballistic. So if it's about safety and you go out there any day, there are pedestrians on that street all day long. Because they're going for jobs, they're going to their homes, they're getting on school buses, they're walking to the casino, all the different places. So if something has to be sacrificed, that center turn lane is where we would advocate for the sacrifice to be. For the minor inconvenience of cars coming through that area. We have turn movements on the other side of Washington Street in the downtown with way more going on, with less issues than this particular location.
You catch that, Rebecca?
did, yes.
But so, yeah, maybe it's putting left turn lanes at certain intersections.
Well, just look. And the area from the where that crosswalk is to where it doors out the middle. That the way the left turn is, it's not really figured out to where you go. It's not channelized. So, and the way that you go into the casino, you can only do right in, right out. So that whole intersection, people use that center turn lane to make a left into the casino. They do it all the time.
Oh, right here,
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
here.
So
Where-
with the,
I don't know where you are.
We're at the left side of the screen. That driveway.
Here over that left side.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So, Edward is saying that folks coming eastbound, right, will utilize the center turn lane to make this electronic system.
Yeah.
Is it the thing labeled Vine Street?
Correct.
Right, so we actually talked about this when we were out there because I noticed that it was different than it had been on Google Maps. And that is a right in, right out, and my understanding was it was recently painted this way to discourage the lefts out and the lefts in, because it used to be a center turn lane and now it has been striped as a left turn lane. And that is serving to discourage. It's making it very clear, much more clear, that that is not. And that is why that left turn lane was continued to the driveway instead of terminated at Lincoln Drive, is so that there are no lefts out. Because, you know, I mean, sure, you guys know motorists disobey the right in, right out without some kind of more physical. Your only option to continue that would be to put up like flexible delineators along the yellow line. But then and the problem there is you block off Lincoln Drive and the business driveway to stop the right in, right out to that. But my understanding, and when we were out there, because it is a relatively recent change, I do believe, it seemed to be more being followed in this pavement marking scheme than what we were hearing from. I mean, I don't know, those of you who are out, you guys who are in the room there seem to say you drive this regularly, and maybe you're observing something different. We had discussed this as a potential solution to this concern.
There's a lot of extra asphalt in that location that gives the drivers the feeling they have full control to do what they want. And they're not out of state tags.
Yeah.
These are local folks that just don't want to go up to the traffic light to circle back.
Right.
So I don't know what the decision was. I guess when the casino was built, it made sense that this was going to be restrictive, right in, right out. But I like people from the casino, they're hitting the main traffic light. This is one of those intersections that all of that extra pavement, that dedicated right turn sweep is super dangerous for pedestrians. The folks going to the casino are probably the least attentive drivers. They're kind of like drivers going to hospitals. They're focused on the big place with what's on their mind, not the world around them. They're probably coming here in low light conditions. So at that particular intersection, it functions in a whole bunch of different ways with a lot of extra asphalt. That I think if you were to design that from how do we get pedestrians safely down the corridor, it would probably end up with a different result.
Okay. All right. So there may be something we can do there. Rebecca, just to do
I
something.
mean, they're
And look at
well,
that.
I mean,
turn lane.
the solution would be to not make it right in, right out, would be to make it a standard intersection opposite from Lincoln Drive. I mean, short of telling them they had to close it. I mean, that's where pedestrians are safest when not in the free flow condition, which is what channelized right turns are. I mean, that is part of our risk assessment tool, is channelized right turns are fundamentally unsafe for pedestrians.
Agreed.
Okay, let's keep going, then we can, this is the other half of that segment.
This one is focusing on the pedestrian sort of accommodation at the signalized intersections and the transition from sort of the 3-lane section to the full interchange section coming in to accommodate that full amount of traffic before any of it breaks off, if you will. Excuse me, or much of it. So this is just showing the signalized intersection improvements, which we've talked about, as well as a change in the lane configuration and basically a lane reduction through this segment, because the lane drop right now happens in this block in a westward direction, and we push the lane drop to the east and are dropping it in the section before Hollywood. So, and then we are continuing to sort of open it up to enter the full lane section on the other side, just because that it increases the throughput of the signal and hence reduces the needed green time for the signal, because you can and then that allows more time for the pedestrians who are crossing that full section on the right. It allows you more time to kind of give to them and not need that sort of center median refuge area. So that would reduce queuing then back through this block. Because you can accommodate more cars in 2 lanes on Green than you can in 1. So that's what we're showing here. And then a buffered sidewalk, because there is more right of way, it opens up there, so pulling the sidewalk back from the edge of road, as they
So what's
continue.
happening at Prospect? There's a
Excuse
lot
me?
going on at Prospect,
Yes?
What's happening there?
Euclid,
Yeah,
that's a Euclid.
Oh, at Euclid? We're not, so not a lot of change.
So if I'm coming westbound and I want to make a left into Euclid, there's this straight, there's really no place to stack and turn.
Right, but
And
if you
then
did
if
continue. That's the advantage of the center turn lane is you're not required to put in tapers, if you will, right? So it's almost as if it can be a driveway, is the left turners can sort of dart into the center turn lane. The volumes, the level, this study did not go out and get, I mean, the volumes we're using are right off the state highway volume maps. We did not get counts. We didn't get individual, origin, destination. That is not the level of, I mean, we're looking at high level, high injury network safety solutions. So I really don't know what the volumes are out there about left turns and stacking. But when we were out, we did do a field visit. I didn't observe. I have personal issues about double lanes at stop signs.
Yes.
And I noticed that the Google I had looked at before I got out there had a single lane, and when I got out there, somebody had done an improvement and put in 2 lanes at the stop sign, and I was like, good grief, this is a personal issue for me. I didn't speak to it, but I was definitely paying attention to this, and I walked up the street. I noticed the sight distance of the stop sign's a little off heading into Euclid now, because it's been offset a whole nother lane. I mean, I have Euclid issues, but it wasn't
I
the
did
focus
too.
of our study. But my point is, I was paying special attention to this Euclid, and when I was out there, I was like, well, I'll relay my fears, because it doesn't look like a lot of traffic is using this, and it looks like everybody who is using it is from around here, from this neighborhood up here. I'm sure they know the situation. They won't miss the stop sign, but my point is, I didn't see a lot of traffic, so I don't think it needs a lot of stacking in a left turn lane. And my thought was the center turn lane is the right solution for this, because it's just going to be somebody who's going to whip in and get out of the traffic and make that left.
What happens is on the eastbound travel, as soon as the road widens up, everybody hits the gas. So the moment they're speeding up, if you're on Euclid with the double, there's a sightline issue. So now you have cars coming faster than you would expect in a sightline you can't see. So you make risky choices. And it's the same thing when you make the left. That you can't gauge the speed of the cars because they optically are seeing the road widen out at the traffic light. And then they can see, like, at that point, they can see all the way to the gap. So they're trying to figure out how to get to the state line. So in that area, I understand what you're doing for the traffic light so that you can get some more green. But I would be cautious about the widening and the addition of lanes so close to that particular intersection. And I fully welcome any of your critiques of that street because it's not been thought out.
What time of day was the field trip?
It was afterwards.
That was meant,
Late morning.
so not during.
No, it was like 3 to. Yeah, it sounds like you're just saying, just close that sucker off.
No, I think that's great.
No, go back to one lane with.
Go back to one lane, maybe align, you have so much asphalt, you can align it perpendicular to travel lanes and build sight lines.
Yeah.
And then in your proposed improvements with the striping, how much further can you push the additional lane
Right,
in your
so,
design?
right, and that, I was just actually following the current tapers or whatever with that, but certainly it could be shortened up and still accomplish both.
Yeah.
Still could open up, but that right there is, let me see, I've got Google open here, I mean, that's. I mean, that's 350 feet. I mean, you could just even do a 150 feet of storage and open up another 150 feet closer to the intersection and still accomplish, 150 feet, that's 7 cars, which is significant, to store for the green, get going.
Yeah.
So, I mean, dealing with the side streets in a big way really wasn't part of this study.
Right.
But, I mean, I guess we could do a little something on this one.
Is that a state? Do we have to pick on people in this room, or is that a city?
Yeah.
Oh, good, I didn't do much talking.
Yeah.
All right, he's gonna go after Ken next then. Okay, are we good here then? All right, one more here. And
This is just, showing the lane drop. And building a sidewalk, reducing the lanes, basically that reduces the crossing distance for the pedestrians here. And then the signal improvements. Now, this would not be the full signal improvements. This would be for Flowing Springs. This would be a sort of more of a quick fix, address a pedestrian situation, but not do the big lane changes. It was sort of like a lower cost option of just doing the corridor, but not the full on Flowing Springs recommendations. And in this case, you see it's just putting in pedestrian features and striping up the crosswalks, but leaving, not building the medians or anything like that. So this is sort of getting to the end of the study area more cheaply, kind of breaking out the different options of implementation.
When can we get the stripers out there?
He likes the striping.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right, so this is safety features basically at all intersections, including
Didn't you take
the
it
ones
out?
downtown,
You do outdoor
all
spray.
signalized intersections.
Not here.
I'm sorry.
I know, my cross.
Didn't you do outdoors white spray paint? Sorry, Rebecca, I'm talking to Edward. Did you do that and then they came back and did that?
Yeah.
Ransom, right?
Oh, yeah, no, don't do it all down. But what we found is that if you stripe in state highway right of ways where things are at, when the crews come through every 7 years, they scratch their heads, but they just put down what was there.
And that's illegal to mark the roads.
It is like, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, don't go marking on our roads.
I would never do that, but there are certain people at hospitals and public works departments everywhere.
These are just some signalized intersection improvements, mainly focusing on the pedestrian features.
Right,
Right,
and
maybe-
the back plates and the flashing yellow arrows, because that's also instead of 5-section heads, or just to give left turns phasing where there are left turn lane. To make it safer for then the adjacent pedestrian crossing. because you can program the controller to go protected only instead of protected permissive. And then the the full diagonal crossing at George.
Can we talk about that?
We want to allow that?
The scramble? So here's what I've observed in that intersection. Most of our visitors don't understand when they press a button, they have to wait for the scramble. So what happens is they get there and they press it and they go through several cycles of the light with the cars moving where they think they would get along. So either they make a risk, they make a decision, they walk with traffic like you would expect, or they wait. They don't know they need to go diagonally across the intersection, so they go to the next leg. And then they sit there and then they're stopped there another full cycle. So what's happening is folks are not, they're getting caught in that intersection and being out there longer than they need to. Or they're making risky decisions as a result of that swim. And any way that could be more green on demand for the pedestrians, like walk on demand when the lights go, or put it in the cycle that they could do more than the scramble. It's just something that is a local concern.
Yeah, they could. I feel like that was a comment we got from some of the city of Charleston.
Get that 100%. I'm driving this all the time. I have two businesses, so one's on the other side of the six, that's actually on the other side. So I walk this probably about 6 times a day at times. I mean, in the different non-peak hours. And I think half the people, including myself, did not know the diagonal was a dip. The diagonal's okay, because that's not communicated.
It's not, it's scramble right now. Not time for scramble.
Okay, so
It's not something that exists right
so I
now.
appreciate.
So it's not
people do the
the
diagonal.
existing conditions are not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't use the countermeasures button at all, because I know I will have to wait 2 cycles of that light, so I just go.
And I made,
At the
let's
same
say
time,
high,
it's not on, like, I go on 3 different.
but you cannot make both legs in one. Like,
Yeah, George and Washington is a scramble.
So actually, George and Washington is an all pedestrian phase, but it's not a scramble. So to do a scramble, that's a scramble is being able to walk diagonally. And that's the hypotenuse of the triangle, if you will, and it's longer. And so you actually need a longer clearance time and pedestrian walk time than that signal is currently timed for. So it's time for it
Is all along at the same time.
It is, yeah, it's not
Right.
Just whatever happens, I don't know what the words are, but you know what I mean, like.
Yeah, the city calls it a scramble and encourages people to go diagonally across the street.
So they shouldn't be doing that, but that's what this,
You know, because I will do that with you, you know.
I do it, and if I.
It's not, yeah, it's not in the phase and it's not fine.
Like,
I just know.
what we will say is that there were a lot of folks that are on site that wanted this.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
So we accommodated. them.
well, I guess that makes sense if they're encouraging it where they think it already is, they're just confused on the
Right,
phase.
it's not.
That before or after they proved from people in the streets.
That's curious.
so a scramble should have then different pavement markings that make it clear, which we're showing here. This is from the National Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And there are different signs that go next to the push button that explain to people what to do, that they can do that when it's time. So it would make it more clear. But there is merit in, but you can't do both. You can't have the scramble and then sometimes have the not scramble because of the pavement markings and the signs that kind of address the scramble properly. You could do with an all pedestrian phase. I suppose you could split out sometimes and not have it be all pedestrian phase. They'd have to wait and see, which heads told them to walk or not walk.
There's just a high number of pedestrians there. The city hall doesn't have any on-site parking, so anybody going to city hall is walking. And it's where the post office is, so it's just,
And even,
yeah, an incredible event space. So there's high pedestrian traffic.
And we do want to emphasize, we're no, the next phase of implementation would be the grants itself. So everything we're showing you is this conceptual, there is no actual design standards.
So making this choice, right?
Yeah, that's where you gotta make the final choices in the next phase of implementation.
does that all have to be done by the June 26th?
Oh, that's only, so the way that we have it pieced out, one part alone could be just part of an SS4A application where it's just this intersection or this part of the corridor.
That's not even possible because it would require city council to take action. And budget money, and they don't have enough
Right,
meetings.
so that's the other difficult part of the timing of when this came out, because it's like, local governments, you can apply, by the way, your fiscal year probably ends in 2 months. How many of you are flush, right? So that makes it very challenging as well, but our desire is that, I mentioned the HSIP will continue to work, stay and see where there's opportunities, whether it's improvements that being made at the district level, which are typically signage, striping, things like that, or the larger stuff that's made, but those decisions are made at Charleston, either through traffic, engineering division, or safety folks. That would be our desire to keep this pushing, because there have been instances where, like in the city of Bluefield, they got a $25 million SS4A grant, roundabouts on a couple state intersections, and the local match was provided by the state through political means. And so there are ways, this isn't, these aren't the only cards in the deck, right? There are ways that projects can come about. There's also, we didn't talk about it, there's larger discretionary grants that are out there that used right the last round were 100% eligible for federal share. So there's no local matching, like the build grant, for example. So that could be another opportunity as well. But yeah, for this round, I think it's very challenging. Again, to have the money to make the decision with the agreements in place with the state. It'd be very, just the time just did not work out. Was not in our favor. And it takes 10 months to get a federal agreement when you get the award. So city of Hagerstown, who received an SS4A planning grant, fiscal year 22, we just finished that 2 weeks ago. So that took 3 fiscal years from the time of award to, and that's a plan. That's not concrete, right? That's not asphalt. So there's a lot of timing challenges that you. Sorry. Right.
All good stuff. But now at least you're prepared. City's prepared. They do want to pursue something that's available. All right, so that was it for the conceptual side.
Can we go back to Washington Street? Because I don't think we got warmed up. When we go to west, very first. So on this intersection, so West Street and Washington Street, all of your observations, I think, is what all of us have seen at that intersection. But I also know that intersection, that it's connecting, this is where kids walk to school, because right then is a walking school. I appreciate the dedicated turn lanes, but my concern is that if you actually go to the intersection and try to make it accessible, that we won't be able to have both dedicated turn lanes and an accessible crossing. And that at this particular intersection, a lot of this is people speeding through, but the numbers, the trip numbers here aren't that many. So it's urban behavior in an urban area. So in this, at least in the experience that I've had, I think if you were to do a conceptual of a directional ProAg ADA crossing and you get the minimum width you need in areas and the delineators and all the pieces, it's gonna require you to consume some of that lane width. And the building on the left corner is a redevelopment site for the city where there isn't the need for on-street parking today. That is something in the future would be there. And I know Washington Street that turns into Martin Luther King Boulevard, speeding is a big issue there. So like making it easy for people to zip through the intersection, both on Washington Street in this area, I'm highly skeptical and cautious of because of the outcomes. So
But we got people with the one lane there, I mean, right now, they're driving where pedestrians are
right
walking.
now, today, the very first thing that should happen is Charlestown PD should put cones on the edge of that curbing. That they should go out tomorrow. It's an emergency. Cars drive over that about every other cycle in the intersection. So the fastest thing we could do is have Charlestown PD put cones out there as an emergency, just like we did for the festival over the weekend. And line this up at least where the car's supposed to be and where the people are. The next step for that is the paint and the white delineator sticks or the temporary barriers and curbing, that type of stuff at that intersection. But nobody can safely walk at that intersection today because cars in both directions mount the sidewalk. And then they're in front of the old Ford dealership coming eastbound. They use that wide shoulder as a right turn lane. And because the lanes out there are like, what, 20 some feet wide, they're able to do that at speed, risky behavior. The light for them is optional. So anything that could be done there to optically narrow, to help define those lanes. Like this plan right here is great. This is something I know that if the state allowed it, Charlestown has a spray truck. They could go out there like next week and strike this. They really could. Like they have the equipment and they love to do this stuff. But overall at this intersection, I'm worried that that would lead to prioritizing the cars and making it harder in the future to get the wide sidewalks that are really needed there to get people safely around the intersection. And I don't even think we put a crossing guard at that location. I think they come down the street.
They're like where the person's taking.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's too dangerous for a crossing guard to stand. So just as you look at that, keeping it as a single lane at all the intersections, we have dedicated turn lanes downtown, Washington Street, Congress Street. That's where drivers lose their minds because they swerve the lane that's not long enough. There are too many things going on. There are people out there, there's shops. But all the streets that we seem to have, the regular intersections, they come in 90 degrees, that everybody has to stop, or that you are expecting cross traffic, they seem to function way better. Like, yeah, at rush hour, a couple cars have to wait for their turn to go through, but they seem to work through fairly quickly without the complaints. We have awareness of it. But yeah, I think if you actually laid out a detailed accessible crosswalk at that intersection, I think there'd be different things. And by moving that right turn closer to the center line, it would give you the ability to get the right turn angle or whatever school bus or truck would have to go there, while still protecting the bare minimum of sidewalk area. But yeah, I don't know what all the movements are at that intersection, but it's, yeah, there are multiple avenues for people to take right turns to go east on this corridor. So whether they go through or make a right turn. And the left, there are not that many coming down on the other side to really like buck up the whole system. And frankly, it's downtown. It's interesting for downtown, where residents on the other side of this, on the west end, complain about speed all the time. So slow, caution.
Well, that's gonna be hopefully addressed in the question if you want to design study with the states between West and the NS railroad crossing or now. I mean, we can look at that. I don't know. It's hard to plan the concern about the future redevelopment on street parking. I mean, who knows what's gonna happen with the buildings downtown, right? There's a lot of unknowns. So it's hard for me to,
Protecting the area for the pedestrian, this area, this is. The flowing springs is super dangerous because there's a pedestrian light with no sidewalk and you need a step ladder to hit the button. Right, like today, that should just be turned off. And blocked up so pedestrians don't cross it. It's just really like that simple until there's adequate area that they can safely get across. This one, there are lots of pedestrians. Because you're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And nothing in this drawing, except for a little bit of a curve, benefits the pedestrian. And all we've done is we made it more convenient for the cars in this location. So if we were to step back and design this from a pedestrian standpoint, what would this street section look like? And if it removes an additional 16 or 20 feet of asphalt on this roadway, all the better, because we can't afford half the stuff we already have to do. So if it just removes it out of the inventory of what we have to plow, and what we have to repave, even better. But this is of all of them, we only have, was it 7 pedestrian crossings in the entire downtown? And this is probably number 2 on the most dangerous. So it's like, by doing this, every time we have those stopped cars and all those types of conditions, it just adds more risk of blocking sight lines and for pedestrians to make risky decisions. Added.
this also helps drivers that are not making risky decisions too, right? Because they understand the direction.
It increases their throughput over the safety of the pedestrian.
I mean, it creates a new conflict, but we're taking out, like, they cannot cut through there. That's what the crash history is. Your concern is that by adding a turn lane, we introduce a new conflict point in that.
Increase the throughput of that area. You're not reducing at all the pedestrian crossing. There's nothing in this other than that sidewalk at the gas station that enhances the pedestrian experience. So by moving the left turns out, we've removed all the conflict. Right, so there's much freer flow traffic. There's no slowing of it in an urban area. As cars come up to it, they are focused on that vehicular movement. And now we're going to add the blinking light that's going to tell them, which is new. It's something that drivers now have to learn. And if it's blinking or not blinking, I can make the left. Well, now I'm like, what if there's a pedestrian crossing?
So that is actually what is the additional safety feature of that light is when there is a pedestrian movement, that light doesn't flash. That's the permissive. It stays a red arrow. So then the left turn is not, when the pedestrian actuation is on Washington Street. If there's a pedestrian actuation to cross Washington Street, then that left turn is only protected. It gets a green arrow for a phase, and then when the through movement is green for west, that arrow goes to red arrow, which means no left turn, and the pedestrian can cross completely protected. That is the advantage of that type of light over a 5-section protected permissive left turn, which is always just protected permissive, or the left can always go left on the green when they have the gap. And then the pedestrian crossing Washington is never safe because that driver is thinking about finding his gap and making his turn and not thinking, is there a pedestrian crossing in that crosswalk. Additionally, the addition of the left turn lane actually will restrict the movement of the right turns coming out of Washington and the lefts because it moves the center line over closer to the curb. And a car waiting there will force, and the stop bar, of course, will be placed wherever the truck turning would demand that it be. But basically, they can't quite make the turn as fast because there might be a car sitting there at the stop bar that they're like, oh, I got to get in here closer to the curb. It's not like as free flowing. And I actually, I know your sidewalks are old and existing through here, but I think the Washington Street, it looks, I mean, short of doing a sort of a streetscape project and moving that curb line on Washington Street in, which could be done with this scenario as well. That's all about the parking on Washington, and not addressing the safety problem here, which is the cut through and the demand for the cut through of this gas station, because of the queuing. But I am pretty sure that you can get at a truly an accessible, meeting all the criteria of accessible crossing here. You know, ADA compliant ramps, 5-foot par or 4-foot par. And
You can get the directional.
directional ramps are not a required accessibility thing. I mean, you can have the diagonal as long as you have that 4 feet in the road to make that turn.
Yeah, so if the public knows, what you're suggesting is that if I'm not able-bodied, my mobility requires me to be in the street, in the asphalt area to accommodate that. What we would say is, instead of prioritizing the car and all those movements, what if we gave more area over to the pedestrian in the most pedestrian area of Jefferson County? So in the decision making here, how can we make this more pedestrian friendly and safe? And I believe by making it safe for pedestrians, it would also be safe for all users, even vehicles.
Understood. And I hear your, I'm gonna steal your screen right now. I've got the Google Maps up over here. And these are all basically blended ramps. And they definitely seem to all have the four, if they were just, and they may be flatter at this point, but with a 4x4 behind the curb, they can make that turn and make that directional. These actually aren't diagonals. These are blended. And if these were landing slopes, they are accessible. They can make the turn behind the curb and head out on the crosswalk in the correct direction. You know, I mean, a big sort of pedestrian project is a different thing than what this focus is about.
So who is this safer for?
It's for everybody. We've got a whole multimodal approach.
Well,
We've
this is one area where you're adding vehicular accommodation and not adding pedestrian accommodation, except for the light.
And
So from a citizen standpoint, in the heart of the downtown of Charlestown, in an area where kids walk, the question would be, what type of features could be added here that would raise the safety and comfort for pedestrians in this particular road? That's just a broad question. I don't expect an answer.
We got your comments.
Yeah.
We got it right here.
Yeah.
Everybody's moving here. So, well said, well put.
Okay. All right, just to wrap this up. We do have a monitoring and evaluation. Basically, we developed a tracking sheet, basically crashes, and they can be easily updated every year as new crash data comes out. And also emphasizing any implementation of strategies can be really checked to see if there are reduction in crashes. And just our next steps, so the public comment period ends next week, 3rd. After that, we will respond to comments, finalize the study, and then just remind them that.
And then if the no, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just be probably, if these are dumb questions, I apologize, but the traffic data from 2023. When, if our public comment period ends at 6/23, and we're missing like almost 2 years of data in there, that's
Delay of how crash data is processed and provided.
okay. And we're, and public and population counts and everything, is there a point where you go back before we finalize the corridor study for a better snapshot of the current state?
If any
To
better, yes, so if any better census or ACS data or something like that exists from when we studied or the analysis was completed, we can update that report.
And do you only use census data, or do you use that traffic counters, traffic cameras, and
Sorry, I was thinking of demographic information that changes. It would be dependent on when the state does their, so they collect on every state road every 3 years. So we would use the most recent data that's available to us. They do some interpolation, extrapolation based on growth factors in the in-between years, so whatever's most currently available to us. I don't think it's the summer or collection edition 5 next year. And we can take a look at that then back it's published. There's always a lag time between collection, especially with the crash.
I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I guess that's, so yes, the public comment period is in 6/23. Like I said, I got your comments. We'll be reviewing those. Would you be okay with us sharing this with the state? Do you have any objection to that? Okay, all right, I want to make sure. Probably shouldn't ask in front of you and Ken, but we're all here.
Public comments to be.
So let's just do that while, and I'll send that first thing tomorrow morning. So yeah, so there's the public comment period. In this meeting, as soon as we stop recording and teams finish the processing, we'll get this up on our YouTube site. That'll be up on our website and that can be shared out as well. And yeah, we'll continue to work with the state and everyone. I'm trying to implement these. I'd love to if we could do another Jefferson County Transportation Summit that happened a couple of years ago when a lot of DOH management was able to make a trip up from Charleston and EPTA came over and they did a bus tour, but there's just some of the challenges right being in Eastern Panhandle that we face. It's just part of life. So we'll see.
another last annoying question. Well, in the beginning, you thank the stakeholders, but it's for those that are not the room, it's quite empty room. Why are the stakeholders, and these are very significant changes they're proposing, are there other meetings outside of the meeting where the stakeholders are more present? I'm just curious why stakeholders aren't in this room, because I mean, there's.
Yeah, I literally sent this meeting invitation to everybody who came to our field visit meeting last October.
And it's not for lack of work.
Oh, no, I'm not asking
Yeah.
that. I'm just curious, is that just normal? Is that indicative of, I just think.
In my experience, when people are the most excited about planning, it's
Plus, we have a meeting with them. Give them the chance to review the documents.
So they have seen and have.
yes. So, yes. So they might be like, well, that's old news now. Yeah, I'm not really sure. But yeah, so, but I thank everybody for coming out. Believe it or not, this was better attended than Miller, right, man?
Yeah. So when nobody shows up, you still have to do the recording with the slides.
We,
He looked at the whole.
Okay, maybe we should close out the recording before I answer that question. So thank you, everybody that's joined online this evening. And again, public comment period closes, but really public comment period kind of never closes when you're a public agency. So, and as soon as we can get the meeting recording up, we will. So thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night.